those of you who were not here last week, and for those of you who were here last week, I just got a report. I was talking to my wife this morning at 4:30 in the morning, which is 7:30 in Philadelphia. As a matter of fact, I surprised Julian. I was on the telephone. But anyway, my wife says that a woman from Wilmington called. There's a couple of women that had gone to Medjugorje last week, and Our Lady seems to be appearing at the 4th station of the cross. There's stations of the cross going up to the mountain. She moved out of the church. Don't ask me what she does things, which way she does it. She's appeared at the 4th station of the cross, which is where Jesus meets his mother. And she promised that there would be a shower of rose petals which fell from the sky. And one of the women says she brought me a rose petal, which I'm anxious to go back and see or touch or feel or something. It is amazing the things that are happening. I was also reminded about one of the visionaries who already got her 10 secrets. Each one is supposed to receive 10 secrets, a personal secret, and 9 for that apply to the world. And when they receive the 10 secrets, she doesn't appear to them except once a year. And this one was guaranteed that she would appear to her on her birthday, which was March the 18th. And when she appeared to her, she says, "I will grant you one wish." Can you picture being in that position to have the Blessed Mother say on your birthday, "I will grant you one wish"? And she was so close to her mother, who had died a few years ago, so she asked the Blessed Mother if she could see her mother. And her mother walks in the door, just real live like you and I. And she threw her arms around her, and her mother said to her daughter, says, "I'm so proud of you." This is all she said. And she kissed her on the cheek, and then she disappeared. Then the Blessed Mother did something else. She said, "Would you like to hug me and kiss me too?" And talk about a heavy, heavy blessing there. So she kissed the Blessed Mother. So for those of you who are going to Medjugorje, take me with you. Anyway, I wanted to bring you up to date on that. What we're going to talk here tonight is about peace of mind. There are so many things about achieving and not achieving peace of mind. I kept asking myself as I was flying from Philadelphia to Los Angeles that if I were given a chance or an opportunity by an angel of God, he says, "Choose one of these and God will grant it to you. You can have all the money you want, Tony, for the rest of your life. Nothing to worry about financial problems. Or you can have good health for the rest of your life. You don't have to worry about ever getting sick. You'll never get sick. Or you will have all the friends in the world. You will always have friends. You will never be alone. Or you will be very successful and you will receive the praise and the power of man. Or you will have peace of mind." I would immediately say, "Give me peace of mind." Because with that, you can have anything you want to. You are at peace with God. You are at peace with yourself. You are at peace with the world. Dr. Jampolsky, who is preaching forgiveness and love, said, this is the ultimate goal. The only goal in our lives should be trying to achieve peace of mind. That should be primary in our lives. You shouldn't worry about anything else. After that comes anything else you want to, whether you want to make $1 million or go to Europe or buy a new car. But peace of mind should be the first and the ultimate goal in your life. There are so many questions as to why do some people have it? How do you achieve it? Why does it come sometimes and sometimes it doesn't come? What blocks it? How can you retain it? As just before I left Philadelphia, this is the way I'm guided. I'm guided by the Holy Spirit, by the Blessed Mother. I had no idea what I was going to talk about, and I saw a book in my library, and I picked it up. It was written by a woman, and she wrote this little short story, which I'd like to share with you. This is the way she wrote it. It says, "I know a man who searched and searched all his life, and he had no idea what he was searching for. In the beginning, because he was very poor, he thought it had to do with having the things that money can buy. So he decided to study hard and become an engineer. Then he became a building developer, and then finally he became a millionaire. But he discovered that that's not what he was looking for. He then tried women, fancy cars. He even got himself a chimpanzee for a pet. He bought a yacht, but they failed him too. He decided to travel all over the world and not working. Then he dropped that. By the time I met him," she said, he had searched everywhere, anywhere, and he searched and searched and searched, and he could not find what he was looking for. He tried learning guitar lessons, taking 3 lessons a day. He tried classical guitar, flamenco guitar, even hippie folk singer music. He learned how to smoke grass and pot. He tried figure skating. He tried antique collecting. He bought antique grandfather clocks and Persian rugs. He opened up several stores. He sold them. Then he tried eating and dieting. He tried getting married and getting divorced. Finally, he tried fasting and celibacy, believe it or not. He became a Buddhist monk for a week, and then he gave that up. He let his hair grow big. He wore a robe, and he wore sandals. When I saw him last, he looked the same to me, so I asked him, did you find what you're looking for? He said, no, but it's out there somewhere. What do you think he was looking for? He was looking for peace of mind, inner peace, self-fulfillment. And believe it or not, as much as he went through, most of us are doing the same thing. We're looking for inner peace, self-fulfillment, and peace of mind. I wanted to share with you some things that I have learned over the last 40 years. Remember, I said 40 years. I didn't learn this yesterday or last month or last year or 10 years ago. This is over a period of 40 years that I've been dealing with people, talking to people, getting involved with people in the Cursillo and Adventures in Attitudes and Born for Greatness in my own personal context and personal consultation. But don't ever, 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 this is what I learned, look for peace of mind out there. It's never out there. It's not in getting a new car, getting another home, getting new furniture, getting married, like he said, and getting divorced, moving to another town. It's never, never out there. It starts within ourselves. You have to start within yourself. That I discovered, and it's a fact. Also, number 2, people have to be themselves. Each one of us was born to contribute something back to God. There is a talent and an ability that God gave to each one of us. It's up to you to find what that is and give it back to God. Put it to use. Because if you don't, you're going to waste it. I would start that search immediately. Tonight, ask yourself, what am I good at? What do I love to do? Do I like children? Do I like orphans? Do I like to work with old women? Do I like to work with the city or with politicians to straighten out the mess? Whatever it may be, but you have to be good at something because God didn't make some people with a lot of talent and others with no talent. All of us have some kind of talent that you have to contribute and give back to the world, which is really giving back to God. The next thing I learned, which is gonna perhaps hit crossways to some of you, is that each one of us is responsible to God alone, personally. I am responsible to God. I'm not responsible to my wife or my children or to you or to the church or to the government, to God. And each one of you is responsible to God. When He created me and when He created each one of you, He gave us people to love us. He gave us a husband and a wife and children and friends and relatives. But that does not take away from the ability and the recognition that you and you alone are responsible to God. And that's where conflict comes in. And when there's conflict, there's no peace of mind. Any child that is over 21 years of age and gets into trouble, that was his choice. It was his decision. It doesn't mean you abandon him. It doesn't mean it's up to hell with him and he goes to jail, he goes to jail. But it does mean that he has to answer to God. You don't have to answer for him. You have to answer for God. The same thing happens between husbands and wives, between neighbors who fight each other or don't talk to each other. Each one of us is responsible to God. The problem begins when you think that you have to take somebody else's responsibility. Hundreds and hundreds of times, I think I've had it up to here, where people constantly ask me, where is your wife? I'm not responsible for my wife. And she's not responsible for me. She's happy teaching college. This is what she loves to do. And when we got married, she gave me something that just knocked me over. When we had been married 2 years, says, Tony, if you betray me, if you go against me, if you go out with other women or get drunk, don't come crying on my shoulder because you haven't offended me. You have offended God. Answer to God. And if I offend you, I'll have to answer to God. We have such a beautiful understanding that if I betray my wife, I am responsible for my actions and I have to answer to God. I love my wife very much. And when she wants to go with me, she'll make sure she'll come with me to leave that. But she's teaching college now. I'm very proud of her. After 9 children and 1 stubborn husband, she went and got her degree. So what else can you say about Mamie? But anyway, the point I'm making is, please, please, I learned this over the years and it was not easy. I have some kids who get in trouble. Lloyd was the best example. How many of you heard the Lloyd story? My God, he was about to kill us. One son that tried to destroy the world. And I thought I was responsible for him. Sure, I try to help him and so forth, but I nearly had an ulcer. I nearly went crazy. The idea, what I'm trying to tell you is, we all have problems with children. And the very first step you can take to help your children is to be an example to them. Telling them won't do it. Sometimes praying won't do it. I said sometimes, because you have to combine prayer with belief. Then it'll work. Believe that your children are the best in the world. I don't care if they run over somebody. I don't care if they get drunk every night. I don't care if they're on drugs. Believe that they're the best in the world, and always, always forgive them and love them and encourage them. That will help them change. But telling them, you can't drink, you're going to drink, it's just going to continue doing it. Somebody here told me tonight, 2 or 3 people told me they have problems with children. I said, you're not alone. There's a long line forming outside this morning. Now, the next thing that I learned is that everything that happens in your life, listen to this one carefully, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, should be a lesson that will get you closer to God. And if it doesn't get you closer to God because you haven't looked for it, and you have wasted that lesson. Listen, let me repeat it. Let's say that something good happens, your son graduates from college. That should be a lesson that can get you closer to God somehow, whether it's rejoicing, whether it's embracing, whether it's loving. By the same token, your boy gets into drugs and he's put in jail. That should be a lesson that should get you closer to God, whether it's learning patience or tolerance or forgiveness. Everything that happens in our life should get us closer to God. Everything, good, bad, or indifferent. When we fail to learn that, we're wasting the best part of our lives to get closer to God. Because our ultimate goal is to get to heaven, to get to God. And we don't take everything that happens to get us closer to God. What else is going to teach us to get us closer to God? Now, Mary said, thank you for reminding me, be sure you tell them that positive thinking has a lot to do with this, and it does. And whatever you think, you will attract to yourself. Believe that. If you believe nothing else, if you go home thinking sour grapes, you're going to get sour grapes in your life. If you think positively of yourself and your neighbors and your friends and your relatives, beautiful things will happen to you. The problem is not whether you think positively or negatively. The problem is that sometimes we can't even control our subconscious thoughts. In other words, our mind is constantly churning day and night. The subconscious never stops. And what happens in the majority of cases is that we had no control over our childhood. We taught this in Adventures United to some of you who went. Remember Bob Conklin? Since we were children, we have heard of 15,000, no, you can't do that, get away from there, stop doing this, to the point where we were brainwashed, where we were afraid to do things. However, we have to learn to forget the past, forget our childhood, which is not easy, but come to the present level of understanding that child is dead. I mean, we are created and reborn every 7 years, they say, so why think about what happened in the past? I mean, it's not easy, but we keep holding on to it, you know. So the idea is to start thinking in a positive now moment, looking forward to a greater future that will bring us the peace of mind that we're creating. How do you define peace of mind? Dr. Jampolsky's called it, listen to this, an absence of conflict. It's that simple. When there's no conflict, you have peace of mind. I like to describe it as being in tune with your inner self. In other words, when your inner self is God, you're in tune with God, you're in harmony. That's when you have peace of mind. And when you do have peace of mind, nothing else will bother you. Nothing and nothing. During World War II, let me tell you something that happened. At the beginning of World War II, some of you may have remembered, maybe it happened to some of the Japanese here in Gardena, I don't know. But as soon as war broke out, the Americans confiscated or incarcerated all the Japanese here, and the Japanese did the same thing in Japan. All the Americans who were out there traveling and reporters, they were immediately, put in jail. One American reporter in Tokyo was immediately apprehended after December the 7th and put in prison. But because he was a very intelligent man, an American reporter, a Japanese officer came to him in his cell and said, listen, if you will do something for us, we will give you your freedom. We want to write the reports that you send back to the New York Times or to the American newspapers, and if you write back and wire them back exactly what we tell you to say, we will give you your freedom. This reporter just looked at him, didn't say a word. He said, aren't you listening to me? He still didn't say a word. They sent a second officer. He tried to tell him the same thing. He says, don't you know, he says, that we can give you freedom? He says, if you just do what we tell you. He didn't bother to answer them. Finally, they sent a third big, high, superior officer. I have the power, reminds me of Pilate over Jesus. I have the power to crucify or to kill you or to release you. Don't you know that if you only do what we tell you, we will give you your freedom? Finally, the reporter stood up on his feet in his cell and said, listen to me. I want to say it only once. What you're asking me and what you're trying to offer me is liberty. I already have my freedom. Meaning he was free, even in his cell. This is what peace of mind can do for you. You can live in the hardest and the most obnoxious conflict in a marriage, in a school, at work, and you can be free as a bird. It has to do how you think and how you feel inside, and only God can do that. If you think pressure, and I know everybody has pressures at work, you don't know what pressure is unless you worked in a television station, and for 20 years, many people who know what the pressure is, Tony, why aren't you dead? Why haven't you fallen down with a heart attack? Or because my mind was not there. My mind was always in happy, harmonious thoughts, and I was trying constantly to be with someone else, helping someone else, being with someone else. I was trying to achieve peace of mind. If I had just concentrated on my job, I would have been dead. I wouldn't be standing here. This is what peace of mind can do to you. Now, the greatest thing that we can do to achieve peace of mind, and I believe this is it, I don't know what else we can bring it to you, is something that Jesus taught us from the cross. Theologians and philosophers and biblical historical studies students and historians are beginning to realize that when people say Christ died for our sins on the cross, that's true. But that wasn't the lesson he came to teach us. He came to teach us, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. These were his first words on the cross. And there's a big discussion right now. Maybe a paper, a thesis, or something may come out to say forgiveness is what brings love. Because when he died for us, he gave us the greatest love. But he also told us we have to forgive. And without forgiveness, there's no love. And without love, there's no God. There isn't. And if you were to ask me, Tony, what is the hardest thing in my life to do or in your life to accomplish? I don't know whether it's getting to know yourself, the real you, or getting to forgive. They're both very, very difficult and very hard. Now, why is it very hard? Because it churns at you. It takes the insides out. And the biggest part of forgiveness is when we have not learned to forgive ourselves. Do you know that some people hold this guilt almost for a lifetime, and it can destroy you? I mean, it can bring ulcers. And I mean, really, I'll give you an example. One of my daughters, God bless her, I was innocent. I don't even remember this, but one of my daughters 10 years ago gives me a piggy bank for Christmas or for my birthday. I said, what the heck is this? He says, crack it open. And I cracked it open. There's 18 cents. I said, what does this mean? He says, don't you remember? I said, no, remember what? She says, when I was a little girl, she says, I cried and cried and cried, and you had no money. This is when we were really poor. He says, I gotta have some money. I gotta buy this. And you went out and took a piggy bank and you cracked it, and there were 18 cents. I said, well, here, this is all I've got, and I gave them to her. I hadn't even thought of this, and would you believe it that he carried this guilt for 19 years? That I had given her my last 18 cents. And I mean, this is a simple thing. Some people carry big grudges for years and years and years, something they did when they were children. And this is the things that we have to let go. I mean, we just have to let them go. So forgiveness begins with forgiving yourselves about anything and everything. Believe this, please. I mean, when God forgives us, he forgives us totally. He doesn't even remember. He doesn't, when you die, he's going, remember when you were 19 years old? He doesn't know what you were, he forgot about it completely. It's we who hold on to what we did when we were 19 years old. And this is the beginning of the cleansing of ourselves so that peace of God can come through to us. It has to start somewhere, and it starts that way. Next, after forgiving ourselves, and this may hurt some of you ladies, but as I was telling Mary, over the last 40 years I've learned that every time I speak in front of a group, and this is tabulated, but 65% of the women that I talk to, and I'm not saying this in general, I'm talking about in the last 20, 30 years, have been abused by their fathers in one way or another. This is a very, very sensitive, touching subject. When Father DiOrio, the healing minister priest from Boston, Massachusetts, came to Philadelphia, and there were 3,000 people there, he says, could I ask all the women, he says, in the audience to come forward that have been abused by their fathers? And nobody moved. He says, believe me, I will heal you. The Holy Spirit will heal you. God will touch you. Come with tears, come with shame, come in front of your husbands, I don't care, but come. And out of 3,000 people, my God, there was over 600, 700 women who went crying to the middle of the arena. I says, my God, they had been raped, they had been abused, they had been abandoned, and of all the mistreatment that fathers can give their daughters, the aloneness, the abuse of silence is worse than anything else. When a father does not hug his daughter, when a father does not work with his daughter, when a father does not take his daughter out for a milkshake or talk to her. Many times I tell people, as I was in Wilmington having lunch with my daughter, you go out to see your daughter? I says, I have pleasures and joy with my oldest daughter. She works in Wilmington. And she's always full of joy and happy to see me. And she takes me to a Mexican restaurant, and that does it. But anyway, anyway, what I'm asking you to do is this. It's not easy to forgive. It isn't. But you cannot live with this guilt. If you have been abused, it could be an uncle, it could be a brother, it could be a husband, it could be a neighbor. Immediately, tonight, there is no other time but now. Ask forgiveness. Start forgiving yourself. Think about it. Pray about it. Put it in the hands of the Blessed Mother and the Lord, and immediately forgive. We have no other time. We have no other choice except to forgive. Now, I saw something on television that nearly devastated me. There was a big case, there was a murder in Philadelphia. A young boy, 16 years old, was killed very, very brutally. And when they caught the guy who did it, who killed this young boy, and I had no idea that the boy they had killed, because I didn't keep up with the story, was the brother of a nun, a Catholic nun there in Philadelphia. And she was in the courtroom, and the cameras were filming people coming out of the courtroom, and they sentenced him for 40 years. And when they interviewed the nun, she said, why in the hell didn't they give him the electric chair? He should be castrated, he should be this. I said, that's coming from a nun? I said, and we're supposed to preach forgiveness? I said, and love? I said, I couldn't believe it. I looked at my wife, Mamie, I says, my God, maybe it's because I'm going around the country telling people that without forgiveness there's no love. I mean, this hit me like square in the face. I mean, I know it hurts. And as I said, someone could come in my house and kill my wife, and am I supposed to put it into practice? I'm supposed to put it into practice too. God forbid that it happens to any of us. But we have no choice. Remember what I said, that everything that happens to each one of us is a lesson that we have to learn that should get us closer to God. Everything. And sometimes we attract these things to ourselves, but we also attract beautiful things to ourselves. I remember my daughter and I were arguing one Sunday morning, drinking coffee in the kitchen, and she's saying, why does everything go wrong? I said, everything doesn't have to be wrong. If you think positively and good, I said, good things can happen to you. The phone rings at that moment. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. I was closer to the phone. The phone was behind me. She gets up from over there and comes to answer it. Oh, shucks, she said, and she asked, what's that? I said, it's a computer trying to sell me something. Do you have encyclopedias? Do you have that? See what I mean, Dad? I even attract a lousy computer voice into the phone. So as she's about to sit down, the phone rings again. So I picked it up, and it was the voice of a 6-year-old girl. She says, hello. I said, well, hello. He says, today is my birthday, and I just want to wish you and the whole world to have a beautiful day. I said, well, thank you, and happy birthday. This little girl and I became buddies. I went to her house. There was a birthday party. My daughter said, see what happens to you. I said, you're always the good things. I said, well, start thinking positively. Start getting excited about yourself and about life, and good things will happen to you. I'm asking you to do the same. Now, how do you begin to practice forgiveness? Remember, for some of those of you who went through Born for Greatness, we had the ABC of greatness: accept yourself, believe in yourself, and create your own destiny and reality. Well, believe it or not, I came up with a simple ABC for getting used to practicing forgiveness. The A stands for ask. Remember? Ask and you shall receive. Ask God to help you achieve forgiveness, to be able to look into the eyes of someone who has hurt you and see nothing but pure love. Ask. If you don't ask God, He's never going to grant it to you. B stands for the same thing. Start believing that it will happen, because it will happen. And C, commit yourself to the fact and the knowledge that God will help you with your forgiveness. I do a lot of personal, private counseling now. That's how I help to make my living, as Mary said. I sell cassettes, whatever happens. Now I don't have any money. But God has always provided. However, I went to see this woman in Wilmington, and boy, talk about problems in the world. I thought there were no problems. But anyway, this woman says that, she says, I'm afraid to tell you what happened, but I guess if you're going to help me, you have to know the whole story. I said, well, it would help to know the whole story. What happened? He says, I have 4 daughters. He says, when my oldest daughter was 13 years old, he says, my husband seduced her. He says, but, it took her a lot of strength to tell me this. He says, but my husband realized his mistake. He himself committed himself to a sanatorium to be cured and to be healed. He came back and asked me to forgive him. He is now well healed, and we're at peace again. I said, well, what's the problem? He says, the problem is that my daughter, who is now 26 years old, this happened when she was 13, now she's 26, hasn't forgiven my husband, her father. So he says, now there's a conflict. This is the problem they presented to me. She presented to me. So I looked at her and I said, forget your daughter for a moment. And I went through the same process. She is responsible for her actions, even though she brought her up and so forth. She was not at fault. We'll get to your daughter in a minute. Let's talk about your husband, because the only way your daughter is going to get healed and come back running to accept her father, after the father said, please forgive me for what I have done, is for you and your husband to be the example of forgiveness. That's the only way. Telling her, come, your father is sorry, he's already healed. She'll never do it. She's still holding to that guilt and that fear, whatever happened, which is awesome and awful. So I said, but answer one question. And be honest with me, I said. You say that your husband was healed and he came back and asked you to forgive him, and you said you forgave him. He says, that's right. Are you sure you have forgiven him? He says, of course. In other words, last week or last month or tonight or whenever you two get in bed together and make love as husband and wife, you still feel for him the same way you felt the day you were married, right? She said, nope. I said, then you haven't forgiven him. He says, there's still that conflict. This is because he attacked his own daughter. I said, then you haven't forgiven him. To forgive him means it's cleansed. He himself took the first step to get healed, to get cured, and he came back and asked forgiveness. Now, think nothing of it. I'm not saying it's easy, but until you can see him in the palm of your hands as a beautiful, loving soul, not as a human being, not as your husband, not as the father of the daughter he raped or whatever, I says, you haven't forgiven him. Pray about it. Ask, believe, commit yourself to this factor so that you can at least begin to feel and embrace your husband with total love, unlimited love, as if nothing had happened. This is the way God looks at each one of us. And she cried and cried and cried. We were at a Holiday Inn because she couldn't talk this anywhere else. So I hugged her and we prayed and prayed. I says, I want you to call me back if the problem hasn't been solved. And she never called me back. But a friend of hers said, Tony, you did help her. He says she finally realized that unless she forgave her husband totally, nothing else would happen. And now my daughter calls, just says she wants to come and talk to both of us. So it was the first step. I didn't keep up with that story because, like I said, I got 20 others coming at me. And my wife told me, when you decided to do this full time, she said, I hope it doesn't drive you crazy. I said, well, I have to absorb everything, but at the same time, not let it stay in here. It has to go out. Because if I let all the problems of the world stay here, that I'm the one who's going to need a psychiatrist or I'm going to need help. But this is what happens when you have to forgive totally. I mean, totally. I mean, you just embrace someone as if nothing happened. I mean, really. I mean, there's no choice. Now, let me jump real fast into what is the big block. There's always a big block, a big enemy that can stop us from forgiveness or from achieving the power of forgiveness so that we can attain peace of mind. Let me put you to a test so you will never forget this. I want you to give me the opposite word of, I'm going to mention one word and you give me the opposite. What's the opposite of black? What's the opposite of high? Low. What's the opposite of right? Left? Wrong. What's the opposite of beautiful? What's the opposite of love? Wrong. Wrong, wrong, wrong. This is the lesson I want you to take tonight. It never fails. People say hate. The opposite of love, and books are now being written, is fear. Out of fear comes hate. And we gave these cards out, and comes envy, and greed, and anger, and conceit, and self-pity, and suspicion, and criticism, and inferiority. Fear, fear, fear. They claim that the devil is fear itself. There's a story told that this town was going into battle. The whole town was about to be destroyed. And a man is walking into town when another man is walking out. He says, where are you going? He says, they're fighting in there. He says, I know. That's why I'm going in there. He says, my name is Fear. This is what this man said. Your name is Fear? He said, yes, I'm going in there to kill 100,000 men. And on the way back, 3 days later, he says, I only heard 10,000 men got killed. He says, those were killed by bullets. He says, 90,000 more died of fear. Fear can destroy you. Fear can kill you. Fear can bring everything. Now, fear is not easy. We have fears of getting old. We have fears of dying early. We have fears of, you name it. My gosh, fears. Now, I'm talking about the fears that begin inside. If a big snake came right here, I'm the first one to jump. That's a natural fear, you know. I'm talking about the fear that just eats you slowly. One psychologist called it like this. I thought it was very exciting. He says, take the 4 letters of fear, F-E-A-R. F stands for false, E for evidence, A for appearing, and R for real. Fear is false evidence appearing real. It appears to be real, but it isn't. Fear is just something we make up in our minds. My husband's going to leave me. My children are going to go into the army. And the more fear you have, the more you will attract those things. That is the problem. Having it is no problem, is that you will attract. If you have fears that your children are going to go into drugs, they are going to go into drugs. I'm telling you right now. I mean, learn it. Be constantly aware of it. And today, as you all know, and this is where our Blessed Mother is coming daily at Medjugorje, the devil is loose. He will put fear into the hearts of men and women and nuns and priests to accomplish and not accomplish. This is why, if they want to criticize me, go ahead and criticize me. If you want to tar and feather me and throw me out of Gardena, do that. But I don't want to face God without giving me the opportunity to tell you what fear is, because it can kill you. Take that for granted. I mean, accept it. It will. Let me conclude by telling you that working with people is not easy, but knowing who you are is the most important thing. Some of you who went through Born for Greatness remember that, and we told the story of St. Teresa, the little flower, that one day she was cleaning the window of the convent and she looks out the window and sees a beautiful flower. And the Mother Superior or another nun asked her, says, what are you looking at? She said, that flower there. She said, that flower could speak. It would say only one thing, that it was born and it's growing and it's alive to give glory and scent and beauty to the world. That's the purpose of that flower. He says, what are you talking about? I was born to grow, to give beauty, to give sweetness, and to give love to the rest of the world, just like the flower. In other words, what she was trying to tell us, that each one of us has to fulfill a destiny. And the biggest destiny you can fulfill is to give back to God what He has given you. And you cannot do it without peace of mind. You cannot do it without learning the power of forgiveness. You cannot do it with having fears constantly. Grow in this, learn in this, and you too perhaps will one day look at your husband, your wife, your children, your neighbor, regardless of what they do, and say, I love you because you exist, and for no other reason, and because God made you beautiful. Thank you.